Before we begin, it must be said that for the past month I have been incapacitated, unable to move forward or backward, to carry on a thought or idea, to string a coherent set of phrases together. The muse had been silent. She had left me, and for a time her eloquence had departed, despite my great desire to speak to all of you. In her absence, I had become mute. The words refused to be birthed. They were stoppered and were somehow countered by a force of will greater than my own. Not through any lack of intention on my part, for the will of man is but a vanity, a tattered sail haplessly carried into tempestuous winds of the ocean. One does not despair in such moments. I am not yet of an age where elder artists and poets bemoan the loss of their artistry and their muse in the shadow of death. That time has not yet come, when the muse bids us a final farewell, having accomplished through us all the works that were within our capacity to bring into this world. I live in a particularly sacred space, a liminal space, on the borders of a marsh nested in the woods, far, far away from the city. Surrounded by dryads and hamadryads, nymphs of all varieties. The muses and the nymphs are closely related to one another and can be both described as prophetesses. Typically, they are localized deities and dwell in a particular area. Socrates in the Phaedrus, after leaving the city and entering the rural countryside, makes a startling realization. In his excitement and mental absorption, he finds himself speaking eloquently at length on a particular philosophic notion, which is very uncustomary of the Socrates who delights in questions and dialectic. When he turns to his companion Phaedrus and asks, "Does it seem to you, as it does to me, that something supernatural is happening to me?" Phaedrus responds with the suggestion that, quote, "some quite unusual rhetorical fluency, euroia, has seized him." Socrates continues, "Hear me then in silence, for I really believe there is something supernatural about this place. So if, as the speech goes on, I often become nympholept, do not be surprised, for I am already not far from speaking in dithyrambs." Such a possession, for possession it in fact is characterized not only by a sense of a frenzied passion, something akin to mania, but more often by silence. The silence that I had gently but firmly been immersed into over the past few months. They say that the silence engendered by the muses or nymphs would typically be followed by a heightened sense of awareness, eloquence, a concentration of all five senses, resulting in a more insightful and intuitive apperception of reality. This may sound like wonderful poetic fancy and wishful thinking, but alas, such eloquence manifests in the speaker, or the one who is possessed, with a marked sense of alarm. It is in fact an uncanny, frightening, and overpowering sense of being seized. It does not at all surprise me that when in my last video I outlined the different types of sounds and speech, ranging from animals to humans to gods, that I was soon to be deprived of my inner voice, as well as my outer voice and the will to even articulate myself in philosophic or spiritual language. But as this video clearly demonstrates, my muse has returned with full force and insistence. There are many things that still need to be said, and much more that will remain unsaid. For how many more millennia we do not know. There is a sense of urgency to modern speech, articulations and sounds that do not soothe or satisfy, but leave us feeling empty and deflated, while we unspool our thoughts into the void through wasted breath, frantically grasping at something substantial. Some of us talk endlessly, expecting at last to be heard. We expect affirmations, empathy, sympathy, condolences, agreements, validations. We use it to express our loves and our hates, our desires and fears, our pains and our sorrows, our accomplishments and our joys. Sometimes we speak because we have something we believe we need to say, but most other times we speak simply to drown out the silence, to create noise. The eternal silence that resides behind our thoughts is deeply, deeply disturbing. What if at last the majority of us have absolutely nothing left to say, nothing of real substance or import? Only a cursory perusal of what society offers us in way of wisdom, or let us not even say lofty wisdom, but in the subtle articulations of the soul, showcases how empty and fatuous modernity has become. Everything has become entertainment, distraction, and narcissistic pursuit of self-aggrandizement. When was the last time you sat down and listened to the songs of the birds, or a babbling brook, or the coloration of a flower? Reality gives us these things. The world offers itself to our five senses. The world is already enchanted, and does not need re-enchantment. It does not require any more than the devotion from one with pure intent and pure heart. It is fundamentally us who have changed, not the world. Our voice, or the human ode, no longer carries significance or power because it is not speaking on behalf of anything beyond itself, beyond the encapsulated and enframed prison of its own articulation. These are words without power. These are simply the wild utterings of subhuman incoherence, phone, noises. And when I speak of phone, I do not mean it in the sense used when referring to ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, which convey primordial sounds of nature. This noise I speak of is the empty banter, the gossip, the opinions that hold no fidelity. They are spoken one second and fly off the next. A wise man once told me that one of the worst sins to commit against the gods and oneself is to speak carelessly, without reverence for the sacredness of words, and the realization that in one human lifetime only a certain number of words are allotted to us. To realize this is to come to the conclusion that each word uttered demands significance. Every word frittered away thoughtlessly will never be retrieved and implanted in the heart of one's being. So pay close attention to what you say and how you say it. Do not waste it on mindless and empty things. This is why the vast majority of people have lost the ability to effectively engage with the magical hymns and sing the theurgical prayers. Their speech is ineffective, epe akranta, but it only produces vain words. When Heraclitus speaks of the logos, he evokes it as the animating principle of the world. In a very real way, the logos, which can be translated as speech, permeates all things, because speech is ultimately, quote, a religious force that operates through the efficacy of its own power. It can emerge from the breath or the blood, since its nature is that of the air, or pneuma. But it can also exist in the physical gestures of supplication or prayer or dance. In fact, any human gesture of a ritualized nature is a form of speech, albeit silent with respect to words. You can still utilize speech, even as you silently sit in your room and think about the day ahead of you, for that inner monologue that follows you around everywhere was considered by the ancients as a form of inner speech. When the act of writing creates words written on paper, we are not simply creating signs for the voice. What has happened is that writing, and therefore reading, has shifted speech from one sensory system to another. It has effectively moved language from the voice to the eye. As the work of the philologist Benveniste suggests, the voice is excluded in the act of reading and is removed from language, because writing has encapsulated it in letters. Therefore, it becomes apparent to me that our entire modern civilization is now predominantly governed by the entombed speech found within letters and scripts. To release it from its imprisonment is only the beginning, but a powerful first step that will slowly unfold the rest of the work that is to be done. But how to do this? Despite Benveniste's observation that speech has transferred from the voice to the eye, in fact, it is even more disturbing to see our entire being transfer to the organ of vision as we sit in front of screens for the majority of our waking life. Despite Benveniste's observation, it is important to remember that the act of reading is the transformation of a text back into the medium of speech. And in essence, to read something is to reactivate and remember the speech that was embedded within the text that had elicited specific thought images in your mind. There's always a synthesis of senses that activate in partnership with one another to create a coming together of the senses as in synesthesia. Your consciousness is a form of vision that can be activated through the speech or logos embedded within the structure of words. Therefore, writing and reading are in a deep relationship to one another, as performance is to reperformance. Every performance of a text, for example of Hesiod's theogony, is a remembering and a reactivation of that mythical time. It brings something from the mythic past to immediacy, to the present moment, and makes it come alive. A feat that cannot be accomplished without the help of the Muses, whom Hesiod evokes at the beginning of the poem to breathe their sweet voice, the Auden or Thespin, into him, to allow him to see vividly all that transpired and currently transpires. Such real words of power activate visions of real things. The word for the English aesthetics is derived from aesthesis, and the classicist R.B. Onions suggests that the word translated as sense perception is derived from aistho, which means I gasp or breathe in. Gregory Shaw is quoted as saying, quote, "This suggests that our sensate experience, far from being an obstacle to contacting the gods, was a necessary medium. Therefore, it is not by abandoning the senses in some ascetic zealousness that one engages with the gods, but by utilizing them all to the full." Allow me a brief and obscure note on the process of breathing. One of Heraclitus's fragments says, quote, "If everything becomes smoke, the nose will distinguish one smell from another." The implication is that if the soul can smell smoke, it can inhale vapors, therefore it can still breathe. This speaks to Heraclitus's belief in the primacy of the sense of smell. The soul can in fact breathe even after death in Hades. During the Italian Renaissance, a Venetian monk named Francesco Colonna wrote a work echoing the poems of Dante, called the Hypnerotomachia Polyphili. Hypnerotomachia is a fusion of three Greek words, dream, love, and strife, indicating the theme of the story. The wanderings of Polyphilo, a lover who is seeking his beloved, much in the fashion of the poets of the Fedeli d'Amore, with esoteric underpinnings. The dreamer at one point in the story encounters 5 nymphs who invite him to a sacred and ritualized bath in the shape of a mandala, a deeply alchemical symbol of transformation that allows him to immerse himself into the, quote, natural state of man, that is, through an immersion into the unconscious. Tellingly, these 5 nymphs are named Apheia, touch, Osphrasia, smell, Orasia, sight, Akoe, hearing, and Guesia, taste. It is through the 5 senses that the anima refracts into 5 nymphs in order to lead the lover into the feminine depths of the unconscious, to attain a measure of wholeness that is at risk of being lost on the spiritual and alchemical journey. After the ritual bath with the 5 senses, the heat of desire and eros increases in the lover as he continues his journey. We will return to the dream of Polyphilo and Jung's interest in the work in a later video. Returning to the notion of aliveness or vividness, these are the terms the poet Hesiod seeks to present to the listener as if he were a witness to the events of the theogony itself. From the Muses, to the poet, to the audience, this vividness is being conveyed as something called Ekphrasis, which is a written description of a work of art that is either real or imagined. The more skilled and inspired the poet, the more his or her words will recreate the vividness and reality of the events that are taking place. The poet will almost disappear to such a degree during his performance that the listener will be transported to the scene of the action as if the listener were themselves there. Another word for ekphrasis is energeia. We have come to understand energeia in its later formulation as power or energy, closely related to dynamis, a work that actualizes something. But if we were to reframe our understanding of energeia in regard to its older meaning, epiphanies of the gods begin to make much more sense. If energeia is a literary device that activates all our five senses to bring the vividness and immediacy of the actions of the gods present to the mind's eye, then we now have the means to engage in real theurgic practice. A final note to end this video. Remember that if the Muses have the power to tell the truth, they also have the power to deceive. For those with the power to speak one can also speak the other. They teasingly say to Hesiod, "Field-dwelling shepherds, ignoble disgraces, mere bellies. We know how to say many false things similar to genuine ones, but we know when we wish how to proclaim true things." Poimenes agrauloi, kake linkea gasteres oion, idmen psuedia pola legene tu moisinomoia, idmen de ut ethelomen alethea gerusastai. But the amusing frustration of it all is that we, as limited human beings, frame false things in opposition to true things. But with divinity, the truth can contain deceptions and still retain its truth. In the next video, we will discuss the relationship of mind to reality and build on this notion of speech and the pathways it can take us on. This notion of deception and illusion is often a great stumbling block to many people who yearn for truth, or who have become so cynical and hurt by the world that they see nothing but deception and falsity everywhere they turn. We will discuss the related foundation for approaching reality by referring to the three rulers or virtues as outlined in the Chaldean oracles: faith, truth, and eros. Pistis kai aletheia kai eros. Take care for now.